There we go. Okay, well, first of all, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for coming along and joining us today. This session follows a popular resilience webinar that Kerry and I shared last month, and it's part of a series of resources that we're creating to support emerging and current female leaders working in reinsurance/insurance. And these sessions, they feel particularly relevant for this time of COVID-19, and they build on skills that will continue to support you as a leader through whatever this next phase brings for us. So before we kick off into the heart of the session, and before I hand over to Kerry, who is our motivation specialist within Parity, for those of you who haven't yet worked with Kerry and myself, I just wanted to do a quick introduction about us and a little bit about the work that we do at Parity. So Kerry and I have both spent over 20 years of our careers in insurance. Kerry from a reinsurance background in broking, underwriting, and also in business development as well. And that was before she took a career break and then did an MBA and retrained as a professional executive coach at Cambridge University. I come from a broking and insurer background, so we kind of span all aspects of the industry. And I've worked in various leadership roles across all of the people aspects, so HR, brand, and marketing. And latterly, I worked as a leadership coach at Aviva, the insurer. I completed my postgrad studies in professional business and personal coaching a few years ago, and I now specialise in how self-care and well-being underpin deep and lasting change. So mine and Kerry's are areas of expertise in coaching. They map into leadership development, emotional intelligence, work-life balance, well-being, of course, and also the different aspects of role transition as well. So including things like returning to work, managing the menopause, and also career progression as well. So we founded Parity because we wanted to use our experience of the insurance industry together with our expertise as coaches to work with women like you, with people like you, and organisations to help drive the changes needed to create true parity within the industry. We know from personal experience how challenging leading can be within this industry. And we also know how valuable coaching can be for personal development. And in a nutshell, Parity's purpose is to work with current and emerging female leaders and their male colleagues, really important, to nurture this pipeline of amazing female talent there is within insurance and to create a more balanced future for the industry. So this thread of purpose, you'll see as we go through this webinar, how purpose can be, one of our key motivators, and it certainly is for Kerry and myself, and hence we created Parity and started working together. So if you're working to make changes around diversity and inclusion in your own role or in your team or within your organisation, and you want to hear more about the research that underpins our work and also the work that we do, then just get in contact and we'd love to talk. And I'd also like to warmly welcome Imtiaz Fulat to our session today. Taz recently joined Parity as an associate executive coach, and he also comes from an Aviva background, which is how we know each other. We work together as leadership coaches. So Taz is a highly experienced leader and coach, and he's been instrumental in supporting and developing senior female leaders within insurance for quite some time. So welcome, Taz, to your first Parity webinar. Okay, so that's our introductions. And just before we sort of kick off fully, I'd just like to ask you what you would like to get out of this session today. So if you could just put a note into the chat, and just a reminder that the chat will only come to us. It won't get sort of shared right across the group. So just to share with us what you'd like to get out of the session today, and just put a little note into the chat for us, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And I'll hand you over to Kerry now.
Hi everyone, thanks Henny, and it's lovely to be here with you all today running another parity event. Before I start talking about motivation, I'm going to invite you to participate in an anonymous poll, and I'm going to ask you to think and reflect a little bit about your own motivation during COVID-19. So here we go. Henny's in charge of the poll. So the first question is, what has happened to your motivation as a leader overall during COVID-19? Has it increased? Has it decreased? Or is it about the same? And if you'd like to put your response in there. And the second question, I'm sure you can handle two at a time. The same question, but this is about your team's level of motivation, and it's the same questions overall for your team. Has their level of motivation increased? Has it decreased? Or is it about the same? And I'll just wait for Henny to collate the results at the other end. I think you guys
still getting a couple of answers through. All right, I'm going to close the poll and just see what our results are. So we can see that there is a leaning towards those levels of motivation having decreased a little bit more for teams rather than for individuals. And I suppose really what it shows, this sort of blend of responses, is that motivation is complex. It feels very different for each of us according to the specific circumstances that we're each facing into. And also it really depends on what's taking our energy and what feels as though it's sort of drawing that energy from us in our work life, but also in our home life as well, because obviously those two things aren't separate. So really what sits underneath this is that awareness of what actually motivates us is what helps us become effective. Okay. Thanks, Kerry.
Thanks, Henny. And as you mentioned there, Henny, motivation is complex, and I'm going to come on to that in a few moments and give you a little bit more detail about the complexity of motivation. Okay, so while you're all acutely aware that COVID-19 has had a significant impact on both the insurance and reinsurance industry, large losses, hardened markets, changes in cover, working from home, homeschooling, higher stress levels may be affecting you, your team and your organisation. And this significant challenge we all face means that there's an even greater need for diversity of thought, intelligent leadership, long-term resilience and well-being. And as leaders, it's especially important to deeply understand motivation during this crisis so that we can compassionately and effectively lead others whilst navigating the challenges presented by this pandemic. And motivation is complex. It's not just about meeting our needs, but it's also about meeting our wants too, so that we can keep our higher purpose alive and vibrant. Employee engagement and motivation are key to ensure that people are fulfilled and productive and healthy during this very challenging time. And as organisations and leaders, we have a legal duty of care to look after both the physical and mental health of our team members during this time. People are engaged by their leadership who motivate and empower and support their employees. And conversely, people become demotivated when they either feel frustrated, unsupported, or overworked. You probably won't be surprised to hear that in a recent survey, over 40% of working parents are currently homeschooling, and on average these people are spending up to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, educating their children, and so are ending up working late into the evening just to keep up. And the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development recently reported that women in particular are being disadvantaged by caring responsibilities during this pandemic. And many people said that the stress of balancing work and homeschooling is difficult, and people are getting very, very tired and fatigued. So it's really important as leaders that we compassionately engage and intelligently motivate our people and support their well-being during this crisis. Now let's take a closer look at motivation and specifically what drives us and our teams. So what exactly does motivation feel like? Well, just before we start, I'm going to invite you to participate in another quick exercise. I'd like you to take a minute and think about a time in your life or your career where you felt very demotivated. And then I want you to also think about a time in your life when you felt particularly motivated, very, very motivated. And what I'd like you to do is to think about these two experiences and think about how did they feel? How did they compare? And what words would you use to describe each of these two experiences? And after you've had a moment to think, could you put a few of these words, the two experiences and the words that spring to mind, could you put those words into the chat and we'll just take a quick look. And I'll give you a moment to do this and then I'll get Henny to feedback.
Thanks, Kerry. So we're already seeing, so a lovely example here. So from one end of the spectrum, undervalued, to the other end of the spectrum, empowered. You know, and I think that really sums it up actually for a lot of people about the distinction between when we feel motivated and when we don't. Some other language coming through here around feeling deflated, feeling undervalued, overlooked. So just a reminder of the question is just sort of words that how you feel, you know, when you think back to a time when you were highly motivated and a time when you were really not motivated, just sort of what those two words are, just to answer the question that came up in the chat. Positively recognized, yes, absolutely. Energetic, energized. There's lots of language here actually around energy, and that really is that really resonates around how it feels when we're motivated. Yeah, from worthless to energized, excited, lovely. Lots of, thank you so much for sharing all of those. That's wonderful. And I think, you know, it really shows that we have an intense awareness actually within us when we think about it, about how it feels to be motivated and how it feels to be demotivated. And so part of the opportunity here really is about understanding what does motivate us. So a little quick story, my own experience of understanding what motivates me involved becoming aware of two very different experiences where I went from a role that I adored, despite it being extremely challenging with very long hours, and sort of crazy deadlines and all of those things I'm sure you're all very familiar with, but where I had a high degree of autonomy and also a strong sense of purpose. Like I knew what we were doing, and I was very clear about the direction that we were heading and why we were going there. I also had a trusted team, and I had a senior leader who knew that she could trust me as well. And then I moved into an environment where the senior leader was extremely controlling, confusing, and mercurial. So they would change their mind a lot, often without anybody really understanding quite why. And my health suffered. It suffered really deeply. And it suffered because I was still trying to work in the same way as I always had in the past. And it took me a while to recognize that the environment was actively damaging for me. And it took me even longer to work out why. So I now know that I work best when I have a strong sense of autonomy. I've got opportunity to be creative, to innovate, and I have a clear sense of purpose. So my reframe that came out of understanding what my motivations are, my reframe in a subsequent role was to learn to see my employer as my biggest client. So I put myself in a consulting mind frame, which meant that I had this strong sense of control about decisions and what I chose to do, but also how I did it. And it sounds ridiculously simple, but it was an immediately effective shift for me to make me feel more motivated and enjoy what I was doing more. So it was only through getting closer to myself and to those motivations that I understood how I can, going forward, how I can reframe potentially difficult situations in the future in a way that makes them make sense to me personally, so that my decisions are then based on calm and balance rather than that emotional kind of like self-preservation basis that I had experienced in the past. And I think one of the core points here, and it's definitely coming out of these comments in the chat, is that motivation builds confidence. But when we lack motivation, then our confidence suffers. And that we know has a direct impact on feelings of well-being, for example. So
thanks for sharing that, Henny. Thanks for sharing the story. And this is that's a great example of noticing what noticing during a time when you're feeling demotivated actually gives you some insight into what actually motivates you. And I particularly love the way that you reframed that particular challenging time. So let's now move on and find out why it's important as leaders to have a deep understanding of motivation. Motivation is the fuel that powers our achievement at work, and whether as individuals, as teams, or within an organisation. And motivation is highly correlated with performance. And so the more motivated we are, the more engaged, the more fulfilled we feel at work, and the better we perform. And if our motivation is low, we achieve far less than we are truly capable of. Of course, it's possible to be a high performer and yet be very demotivated. And when we are demotivated for some time, this can result in long-term stress and health-related problems. And one useful way of thinking about this is our motivation, when applied to our skills, determines the level of our performance. And you can see in this next simple slide that if someone is highly skilled but not highly motivated, then their performance directly suffers. And you can see there in that simple calculation there. Conversely, if we are able to correctly identify and positively influence our own or a team member's motivation, then this can have a significant impact on our performance and well-being and that of our team. So we know what motivation feels like, and we know that motivation drives performance. And what's also really important to know is that motivation is complex, and we talked we talked about that earlier. And we can see from this description that motivation is about both internal and external factors. It's about what particularly stimulates desire and energy to enable people to be continually interested and committed to achieve a goal. And so our behaviour in the workplace is driven by a mixture of both of these two broad types of motivation: extrinsic motivation, the external factors, and intrinsic motivation, the internal factors. And extrinsic motivation comes from, funnily enough, external influences, and these include things like rewards, threat of punishment, and competition. And intrinsic motivation comes from our internal influences within. So these are often directly linked to our personal values, our beliefs, and our personal drivers, and it's also related to enjoyment from the task itself. And sometimes intrinsic motivation is referred to as self-motivation. It's the ability to do what needs to be done without influence from other people or a particular situation, and therefore this is deemed to be highly desirable in the workplace. So identifying and harnessing a colleague's intrinsic motivation is really important as leaders, because it provides valuable insight into specifically what drives us as individuals, and also what specifically drives our colleagues within our teams. And by identifying and harnessing these drivers provides ourselves and our teams with energy, with confidence and focus. And this in turn drives greater business results, more satisfied customers, and greater well-being. As coaches at Parity, we work with clients either on a one-to-one or in small groups, and we help them become more self-aware of their intrinsic motivations. And this is because this valuable knowledge helps our clients to personally develop and achieve their professional goals. And as Henny's story shows, knowing what least motivates us is also very valuable too, because this can directly interfere with our personal performance and our well-being. So for you as a leader, what are the benefits of highly motivated team members? Well, motivated individuals generally have much greater levels of self-confidence and self-belief, and they are more likely to care about their own personal success. And we know from research that sometimes women can be impacted by lower self-confidence and self-belief when compared to men. And in this slide, reading from left to right, you'll see that motivated individuals are also more likely to put in extra effort and produce increased output, higher levels of customer service, and excellent business results. They're also more likely to be persistent and go that extra mile, especially when the going gets tough, like now during this current crisis and tough economic conditions. And they're also more likely to take greater pride in their work and produce high quality work. They are also more likely to innovate and produce new and creative ideas, and this is likely to be very valuable to our customers and other key stakeholders right now during this pandemic. And they're also more likely to make fewer mistakes, which means better organisational efficiency. And finally, they're more likely to feel a greater sense of satisfaction and personal pride and fulfilment. And this in turn enhances personal well-being. So as a leader listening to all of these benefits, I'm wondering what actually drew you to this webinar today. Which particular benefits that we've just highlighted there especially resonates with you right now? The next important thing to understand about motivation as a leader is that it changes over time. And this is because our needs, our beliefs, and our wants, and what we enjoy actually changes over time too. And if I could briefly just share a story with you. When I was in my 20s, I was living and working in London, and I didn't earn very much at the time, but money was incredibly important to me. And life was very simple. I needed enough money to pay the rent, to go out clubbing every week, and to treat myself to a nice meal out from time to time. What wasn't immediately obvious to me at that time was that I used to get very frustrated at work if I wasn't learning, every day. And learning is one of my key motivational drivers. And some of my best line managers recognised this in me, and they provided lots of great learning opportunities. So when I worked for a broker, they allowed me to rotate around various departments. So I got exposed to everything within the organisation. And when I was an underwriter, I was given the opportunity to go and learn in another market. So I went to work in Australia for a while. And these were fantastic learning opportunities. Now I'm not in my 20s. Learning is still one of my key motivational drivers, but I'm also very motivated about doing work that has meaning and purpose, and where I feel like I can make a difference, like working as an executive coach with Parity. And this motivational driver has just got stronger for me over time. We all work in financial services, and money's talked about a lot, and money can be a motivational driver, but it's not the only motivational driver. In fact, it's only one of 9 potential motivational preferences, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But before I do, I'm going to invite you to participate in one last quick exercise. So what I would like to know is what really motivates you as a leader and your team members at work. Can I ask you just to take a moment and think about what really motivates you at work right now? What gives you energy, and what drives you, and what do you really enjoy doing the most? And I'll just pause for a minute to give you an opportunity to write something down if something spring to mind. And now I'm going to ask you to think about a team member, perhaps someone who's different to you. And I'm going to ask you the same question. What really motivates them at work, and what really gives them energy, and what drives them? What do they enjoy doing the most at work? And again, I'll just pause for a moment for you to write something down. So what's really interesting to note here is that, sometimes we may have actually forgotten what really motivates us, or it's changed, or it may be dormant, or it may have been suppressed by our social conditioning, or even the way that we were brought up. If I think back to my own childhood, being good at maths and making money was highly valued in our household. Whereas being creative and innovative and embracing change wasn't valued in the same way. And as a reinsurance underwriter, it took me a bit of time to realise that I'm very motivated by innovation and creativity and change. And when I eventually realised this, I used this knowledge to change my underwriting role. As I mentioned earlier, we are all motivated by a combination of drivers at any one time. And these motivators may be more obvious to us than others. These motivators may be similar or very different to our team members. And even if the motivators are similar, the relative strength of each motivator may differ, and our relative sense of fulfillment may differ too. And it's the combination of all of these motivators combined with how much we use them in our work which determines our level of fulfillment and our level of performance and our well-being. What's really important to note is that your work, your role, your day-to-day tasks need to generally reflect what specifically motivates you or feel fulfilled and to perform at your best. And as I said earlier, it's also really important to discover what motivates you the least, so this doesn't get in your way or drain valuable energy and interfere with your overall performance. Okay, so far in this webinar, we've taken a quick dive into motivation and identified some of the most important facts to consider as leaders when we think about our own and our team members' motivation. And next, I'm going to talk very briefly about a very insightful online analytical tool we use at Parity to fully understand what really drives and energizes our clients, and it's called Motivational Maps. This analytical tool provides insight into what really motivates individuals at a specific moment in time, and it also calculates how fulfilled they are and how the individual or a team are currently performing. And this valuable data, when used together with one-to-one or group coaching, can be used in a number of ways to help with things like personal development, leadership development, team building, recruitment, succession planning, and managing business results. And this tool can also be very valuable to leaders during this pandemic, whilst people continue to work from home, when we physically see less of our team members. For example, this tool can pick up when somebody's overstretched. And if this continues over a very long period of time, this could result in poor health and well-being. Let me just tell you a little bit more about this tool and how it can be useful during this current crisis. You'll see on the slide there all of the 9 motivational preferences, and I won't read them all out, and we will send you the slides after the webinar, but I will give you a couple of examples of how this data might be useful during this crisis. So if someone has a strong creator motivational preference, they are more likely to be energized and driven by suggesting new ideas. And this could include creating new insurance or reinsurance products or solutions, or it could be creating new business services, or it could be redesigning organizational processes or utilizing new technology. And these guys are more likely to embrace change and challenge the status quo. If someone has a strong star motivational preference, they may find working from home more difficult in the absence of regular positive feedback from their line manager. And in fact, there's been a really interesting Harvard Business Review article about just this, about how to continue to motivate people and the fact that you need to provide very regular feedback during this crisis to maintain their level of motivation. And finally, if someone has a strong defender motivational preference, then these may feel more anxious about returning to the office, for example, and they'll need regular communication about safety and any changes in working practices. They prefer stability and are a lot less comfortable with change. So a really solid and regular communication strategy would be really quite important to maintain people who have a strong defender motivational preference. And finally, let me just share a little more about how Motivational Maps works before handing back to Henny. Each client is required to complete a quick 12-minute online questionnaire, and in return they will receive a personalised 15-page report. And I think today it's something like 57,000 people have been mapped, and they're deemed to be around 99% accurate. And this tool calculates and scores each of your 9 motivational preferences so that you can see what motivates you the most and how strongly, in descending order down to what motivates someone the least. And on this slide, taken from a report, you'll see that this client is very highly motivated by their creator and searcher preferences. And in fact, they score over 30, which is a very high score. They're very focused on those motivators. And they're least motivated by their defender preference. This tool also calculates an individual's current level of fulfillment so that you can actually see if someone is fully leveraging their skills and talents and what aspects of their work or role they may be finding frustrating or stressful, and this may have changed a little bit during COVID-19. I haven't added this specific information to this slide, but I can share with you that it's incredibly important for this particular client to use those top 3 motivational preferences, so creator, searcher and spirit, every day, in order for them to feel truly energized, satisfied and fulfilled at work. And I can share with you that this client is now thriving and performing at their very best. So I hope this very brief webinar has been helpful to you as leaders and provided a little more insight about the science underpinning our complex motivational drivers and how this valuable knowledge can help us lead intelligently and drive better business results and lead compassionately by driving greater employee engagement during this crisis and beyond. And if you have any questions, either put them in the chat or email them directly to either me or Henny, and we will respond to you directly. Thank you for listening, and I'm going to hand you back over to Henny.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you so much for walking us through that and sharing some of your expertise around all of this. I know that I have found doing my own motivational map absolutely revelatory. And one of my reflections, just listening to you there, is that I really wish that I'd had access to that kind of insight when I was running large teams myself, just to have had that level of awareness as a leader around how best to motivate my team, but also how to motivate myself, how to keep myself motivated. And I know, so earlier today, just to sort of share with everybody, earlier today I reread my own motivational map. So the last time I did it was in February, so clearly the world has shifted a little bit since then. But what was really interesting rereading it was how astonishingly accurate it was. I mean, like, weirdly so, to the extent that there were a couple of lines in it where I just thought, God, like, only I would really know how true that is. It is a fantastic tool, and I can see there's a number of people in the chat asking for a bit more information about the tool, and I'll share that in a moment. So I think one of my other observations actually around this tool, and it sort of goes back to that reflection on what it was like to run large teams and also operate within a large complex organization as well, which I've done for the majority of my career, is that this tool enables us to, because it enables us to understand ourselves better, it also improves communication so that we can manage upwards and sideways, as well as like across our team and with our peers, etc., more effectively. And I'm really mindful that we are now operating in a time which few of us have got any real experience of operating in a time that's got sort of a crisis like we're facing now in terms of what the industry is facing now. So knowing ourselves becomes an even more vital component in our leadership toolkit, I think. And as a leader, when we really understand what motivates us and what motivates our team, I think we're more able to get the best from them and also to give of our best as well. And there was a quote that I saw in my profile that I reread this morning, and it said, "The shared language of the motivational maps can provide an escape route from conflict." And when I reflect on the story that I shared about, when I'd been really demotivated, actually that would have been incredibly valuable because I felt like I was operating in conflict. So there we go. There is one last poll that we would like to ask you to quickly just share some thoughts with us, and it is, I'm just about to pull it up on your screen now, and it's about really getting your thoughts on future sessions that may be useful for you. So one of the things that Kerry and I are really keen on, and Taz as well, obviously, now that Taz is part of our team, one of the things that we're really keen on is making sure that all of the materials that we create for you are relevant and meaningful. So we would love just to get a quick snapshot of your thoughts around which of these topics resonate with you, which ones sound most useful, most valuable to you going forward. And so I mean, if you can just sort of click on any of the ones that resonate, that would be really wonderful. And then lastly, so I think I'll just sort of, you should be able to move that poll screen out of the way so that you can see the information that's on the slide under here as well. I'm going to leave the poll up just to give you a chance to keep reading through those topics. But if you are curious about your own motivational drivers, if you want to access this tool, if you want to find out more about what really motivates you deep down, and then potentially what really motivates your team in order to enable you to lead them more effectively, into the times ahead, then just get in contact with us. Basically, alongside the report that you get from completing the tool, we'll also provide a 90-minute executive coaching session as well. And so that session is really tailored to you, just as the report is. But the coaching session is all about the areas that you feel are most relevant and useful for you going forward. And then we'll use our experience, our expertise to help flag things that we've identified in the analysis that we do that could support you even more. So the offer is there if that's something that resonates with you. And that's where we are. So hopefully this has given you some insight into motivation and a little taster of the value of objectively analysing what motivates you and what motivates your teams, both during COVID-19, like, you know, during this phase that we're in now, and beyond. And if you'd like to learn more or discuss anything, or if you need any support at all, then Kerry and Taz and I are here for you, and we would love to speak. Okay, so thank you so much. I can just see that someone has said that they can't see the poll. So we will also be sharing feedback straight after this session. And within the feedback, there's an opportunity to share further thoughts on other sessions that you'd like to see. So have a look out for that in your inbox. Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Take care, and thank you for your feedback. That's wonderful. Lovely, Kerry, just so you know, really great webinar. Thank you. So as you know, things that motivate us, feedback. Right, take care, everyone.
On that note.
On that note.
Take care.
Bye.